You can have the best message in the world. We liken it to like a candy bar. You can have the best candy bar in the world, but if you don't have a good wrapper, if it's not something that gets it pulled off the shelf, no one's going to know it.
Maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, gosh, I don't know if I'm spending that kind of money on ads. Why would I consider doing this message testing? It can be valuable, again, even when you're trying to determine what is that positioning? What is the story that you're trying to tell?
We always say, what doesn't get tested or doesn't get measured can't be improved. And so this is another aspect of how we can help improve messaging.
Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Spenders podcast. We are Kurt and Kristen Ludhart, your hosts, and co-founders of the Prosper Group, an agency that's raised over $500 million and elected over 100 members of Congress, 15 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and 1 president. And now, in addition to helping political candidates get elected, we're helping your business get elected by answering this question. What if you could exponentially grow your business by tapping into a unique and engaged audience that we call Liberty Spenders? Now, Liberty Spenders are politically conservative or faith-based consumers, and they're looking to buy from businesses and brands that align with their values. If you want to learn more, you can get our new best-selling book for free at libertyspenders.com/free. And today we are so excited. We're going to be talking about video-based message testing and diving into one of the 5 Ps from our book, The Proof Step. This is where we walk our clients through the process of testing their messaging before launching it into the wild. I know, novel thought. As we talk about in our book, taking this step really helps give entrepreneurs confidence that their message is effective before spending even a penny on it on advertising. So we are going to be discussing and airing some video ads on this podcast. So if you want to watch those later, we're going to have the link posted in the show notes so that you can catch those and see everything.
Our guest today is AJ Rehberg, president of G2 Analytics. As a co-founder of G2 Analytics, we know AJ from our political work. He's also assisted with innovative product development and provided creative business-oriented solutions to companies ranging from technology startups to Fortune 500 companies. He's a graduate of Seattle University, and it says here he resides in Arlington, Virginia, but I know you just moved to Ohio. And,
yes, after 14 years, we finally made the move and got out of the swamp.
Yeah, and so we're happy to have you close to us, and really excited to have you on the show.
Well, Kurt and Kristen, it's great to be with you guys today. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, now, I was excited about this. I think probably you were on our radar earlier, but the first time we really worked with you on a campaign was Ted Cruz in 2018. That's the first time I saw you guys in action. And, Cruz used you guys to test his ads and was doing something really cool where he was showing ads in different markets based on what people were interested and passionate about at that time. In Houston, Texas, there was still a lot of attention played to the, I believe, hurricane that went through, and they tested and ran an ad on the hurricane. They did some other stuff out state, and you guys did all that testing for them and helped them make adjustments. And it was really, really cool tech.
Yeah, one of the things I really remember from that campaign was, we were really focused on the Dallas and the Houston DMAs. Mm-hmm. And some of the videos that were cut were, if I remember correctly, it was one that was cut for law enforcement. And it used all of Houston, it had Houston sheriffs, it had Houston law enforcement. It did well in Houston, but it felt real flat in Dallas because there wasn't that personal connection. It was one of those oversights that, it was a good ad. The message was fine, but the packaging was bad. And that's something that, we really focus on is you can have the best message in the world. We liken it to like a candy bar. You can have the best candy bar in the world, but if you don't have a good wrapper, if it's not something that gets it pulled off the shelf, no one's going to know it. And sometimes that message can just be lost because of that final step of testing isn't done where, you've pre-tested all your messaging with polls and other sorts of public opinion research. But what if you're skipping that step of testing it in the method, in the form that it's going to be delivered to, whether it's voters or whether it's consumers, then you're really missing an elemental step that's key to making sure that you can resonate and attract, whether it's, again, voters or new business.
Yeah, well, describe it a little bit, how what you do and how it works so that people can picture it a little bit. I mean, I
Yeah, well-
know because I've been there.
Yes. And as we talked about before we aired, some people will think of, dial testing in a certain way. So I know you're going to get into that, AJ, but help describe specifically how yours works and how you're different.
Yeah, well, let me step back a bit and kind of give you the genesis story of where our kind of methodology came from. And it's kind of funny. It came from Beer League Hockey. My co-founder, Calder Gage, who unfortunately can't be with us today because his wife gave birth to their first child last night, a beautiful baby boy.
Unfortunately, but fortunately,
Yeah.
right?
Unfortunately,
It's
but
like,
fortunately. So
We're
I'm glad
so
he's not
happy
here,
for
and I'm glad
them.
he's resting and getting ready for this new part of their life together. So that's great. But yeah, Calder and I met playing beer league hockey and started talking, drinking beers after the game, and we had a lot of similarities. He came from the political world, much as I did, but from a different place. I grew up. My father was a politician basically my entire life. When I was real young, he was a state legislator. He was appointed lieutenant governor of Montana. Unsuccessfully ran for Senate in 1996 against Max Baucus. Then successfully ran for the House of Representatives. Was a member for 12 years before ultimately running another failed campaign against John Tester. So I came from kind of the consumer of political data. We had crosstabs and on the coffee table, and I had an insider view of that for my entire life. Calder comes from the public opinion side. His father, Alexander Gage, who unfortunately passed away recently, was kind of the forefather of micro-targeting. He invented what is known as modern day micro-targeting.
Exactly.
And it was something that, we take for granted now. We think of it as something that every campaign needs to do. But when he was doing it, I mean, he was the mad scientist behind it, like coming up with this very, very good but crazy new concept of how to market political campaigns, but it also blended right into the consumer world. So that's where we kind of have this mutual kind of understanding and level of it. And I say this because the reason that we wanted to create it was from my personal involvement with politics. I remember, especially in the Senate campaigns where there's a lot of money being spent, a lot of ads being run, it was still 4 or 5 people in the back room deciding what ads were going to be run. And these people were the political consultants, the ad guys, and they're all very good at what they do, but they're so close to it at that point, especially in a heated election, that they're not necessarily always going to make the best decisions. And it's not to fault them, but it's just they're too close. And with technology the way it is now, this is where Calder and I started thinking, like, we could do focus groups, but at survey scale. You could do it at 400, 500, 1,000 people if you wanted to, and still get that blend of qualitative, quantitative feedback on video. And we do talk about video research because ad testing is a big component of it. But there's also so many other types of video content that you can test, whether it's surrogates, whether it's CEOs, their financial reporting, anything that's video based and out there, either it's internally to your shareholders maybe or externally to potential client, whatever it is, that's content that's representative of what you want your message to be. And that all can be tested now in much faster, much more affordable way than what was traditionally done. In a Senate campaign, you might get 1 focus group, maybe 2, 3 if you had a ton of money. But again, you're talking 10 people in a room. That's not the type of research that we thought should be done in the 21st century.
No, you're exactly right. And it's also why we're so excited to be bringing some of this information to business owners, because again, if you're not living and breathing this every day, you see this kind of stuff used on TV, you see it when there's big debates, or you think, oh, only the biggest brands can get access to this. And that's just not the case anymore. And you guys have paved the way on that. So again, you're exactly right. And I'm so glad you told your story because it just showcases that this is in your blood. It's in your bones.
It really is. And it helps coming from the political environment because it is such a dynamic environment and things have to happen quickly if they're going to be, create actionable intelligence that can be used to really move the needle. But it also has to be done on a budget. Campaigns, they spend a lot of money, but a lot of that just goes to the advertising. And so you have to find creative ways to be able to do more research, get more data so you can make those data-driven decisions on ad placement, ad spends, and what, and what that messaging needs to be. Because there's always time to optimize or make things better. We always say, what doesn't get tested or doesn't get measured can't be improved. And so this is another aspect of how we can help improve messaging all the way from the content creation all the way down to the ad buys. And so that's really what we're excited to do. And having been born out politics, I think, there's direct applications because to us, it's no different. Trying to win the hearts and minds of a voter, even though it is a zero sum game and it's a little bit more like you can't be the fifth in the market and make a profit. You have to be, it's either win or lose. And so I think
we like to say there is no second place.
You mentioned a couple of things that I think might spark the interest of some of our business owner folks, because we're not just talking about, okay, you've got this sexy new ad and now you want to test it. It might also be, you could test some basic brand messaging, how your CEO appears. And I'm thinking about a couple, big national brands we know of, and where maybe ad testing might have saved some money, right? The more recent example might be what Jaguar is doing, right? They've got they got an ad out with a bunch of people dressed in weird colors of clothing and talking about creativity, never showing the car, right? Now, maybe they have done ad testing and they're going for a demo that likes that sort of thing. So maybe we're missing part of the story here, but they're down 25% sales in 2024. So
they've been dropping steadily, losing market share.
And maybe there's something about, hey, before we spend a gajillion dollars and, rebrand ourselves, maybe we ought to put this in front of our typical demo and see what they think of it. And it's I think that's really the value proposition we're making here is if you're going to spend money on paid marketing, why not make sure it's actually advancing your goals before you're 30, 45, 60 days into a giant spend. And I also thought it was interesting when you're talking about, it doesn't also have to be an ad. And so we can go way back to probably 2023 and look at, say, how Bud Light unveiled their influencer who really tanked their company. And that's also something that could have been thrown in front of their audience.
Yeah, well, especially with the case of Bud Light, I think any one of their influencers that they're going to pay and have promote, they should test. And maybe to your point, maybe both of them had the point made calculated decisions that they thought that this was going to help expand market share in one segment, but not really hurt or affect their core, especially with Bud Light, and it proved to be disastrously wrong. Another example that we always like to bring, we always call it the don't be like Beto. I don't know if you guys remember when Beto O'Rourke announced, he put out an announcement video that he was running. His wife was just sitting there like stoically, like not talking, and people picked up on it right away. And on the flip side, he got a lot of unearned bad media out of it. Even left-leaning organizations called him out on it because it was just a weird video. And if you're going to put that out there as your announcement, it's going to be shared hundreds of thousands, if not millions of times, presumably, or at least you want it to be. You probably want to make sure that more than just you and a few consultants sit down and say, yeah, this is the way we need to go.
Yeah. So I was hearing you talk and thought we really ought to put right up front, like, here's the problem we're trying to solve. Right.
Yep.
But yeah, let's get into it a little bit. Just, the way I always try to describe this to people is it's like when you're watching Fox News and who's the famous guy?
Frank Luntz.
Frank Luntz does these things, where, there's a group and they're like turning the dials as he shows an ad. And I think maybe you guys approach it a little differently, but I think that's a good mental picture for people who watch, cable news networks.
Yeah, it is. And so, our moment-to-moment scoring platform has the same type of objective. It's to measure respondents' reactions to video content as they're watching. And we're kind of akin to a focus group in that there's two components to our research. One is more of the quantitative type of research that we can get from asking pre and post exposure questions and then analyzing that based on different audience segments. But then there's the qualitative piece of it, which we can get from the moment to moment and also from open-ended verbatims where we may ask respondents, in their own words to describe what they were thinking about while watching the video. And that helps tease out and kind of put some color onto the quantitative data. But our approach to the moment-to-moment differs in that traditionally with a dial, you're trying to measure intensity of emotion. And so you start at 50, which is neutral. You kind of dial up. If you really like something, you dial up to 90 and then you go back down. Yeah, it's kind of a nuanced approach. And if with a good moderator and an in-person focus group that can correct behavior and give good instruction, yeah, you could probably get some good information from it. In an online environment, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But also there's a lot of what is my 60 versus Kurt, your 70? And if I'm at 70 for 6 seconds, so was I really at a 70 that whole time, or did I just peak to a 70 and then just nothing really happened until this next point and I dialed down a little? So that we saw some issues with it. The other thing we saw for like this type of research at scale is you also have problems in in-person focus group with things like moderator bias or strong moderators or a respondent that may be really vocal, and then you might have a timid respondent. So you've got a couple of factors that create some issues for collecting really good data. So when we're doing online surveys, so people are doing it at home, they could be a little bit more honest. I think sometimes too they're even a little more honest in the moment to moment than they are necessarily in the written part of the survey. But the methodology that we came up with was moment to moment was make it a binary indicator. So it can be anything. If you like or dislike the content, if you agree or disagree with the content, if it makes you more likely or less likely to support a candidate, more or less likely to buy a product, and then just let them watch it. And when they see something that they react positively to, react positively. If they see something that makes them react negatively. So what we do is we measure the volume of respondents. So what percentage of respondents in any given segment react positively or negatively to any segment. And then what we'll do is we'll take the average of that to be able to compare across different audience segments to see, where do people trend up, where do people trend down, where are the areas of highest engagement, where are the areas of lowest engagement. Also things like polarization, where do two groups maybe really widely differ on something, where you'll see one group spike up and one group spike down. So it's a different approach, but it's really capturing the same thing. You're just trying to identify what moments of a video do people react to? How do they react positively and negatively? And who are they that are reacting? And from there, then you can break it down into, all sorts of different audience segments based on the quantitative and biographical information we may get from the survey piece.
So the subtlety here is when we show some of these ads and we show the results where there's lines going up or down, when it goes up, what we're really saying is that a much larger percentage of the people viewed that particular thing as positive, versus just because it went up really high, it doesn't mean that they, it somehow achieved some kind of 99%, elation. It's just that a much larger group of the audience liked it, which I think is for me,
it's not intensity.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not intensity of the emotional feeling you have. It's not like I'm ho-hum about it to I love it with a whole gradient of things that are just, no, at this moment, something compelled me to say that I like it. And then so we look at it in terms of net. So when you're at like a net 20, that means 20% more of the respondents in that audience segment liked it than disliked it. And the reason that we have to kind of break it down to a net is we may have audience segments of different sizes. So it's hard to compare apples to apples in terms of raw numbers. But when you do the net, then you can compare across basically any any audience segment, demographic, or combination of those. So this is where you could, like if we were to do a subset of Liberty spenders versus non-Liberty spenders, we could even break that down to Liberty spenders that attend church 4 times a month, or Liberty spenders that have another kids at the house under the age of 18. So we can break that out because at the end of the day too, like the work that you guys have been doing is, I think this is really the big picture of all of this is you guys have done a good job of helping to identify who Liberty spenders are and where they are. And so with this, now we can start looking at those different types of Liberty spenders and how they react to different messages, different content, different products. And then that's that full circle. Now that we've got data on how the content performs, and we can look at how it performs across these different audience segments. And then you find the ones that, you really overperform with. Next step is, where are those people? How do you get your content in front of them? And that's how you sell products.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really exciting. I want to get back to your story, but before we do that, I think we show off the stuff.
We tested a couple of ads that I wanted to show you guys today. One was for Ultra Right Beer, which is kind of an upstart small brewing company that really wants to take on the woke agenda and be very out there about that.
Yeah.
A quick point to our listeners about that is it's founded by Seth Weathers, and we had him on our podcast. So an incredible entrepreneur. And so it'll be exciting for you guys to see the results of that.
Cool. And then the other one we did was Patriot Mobile. I'll go through, we'll play the video for you. You can kind of see the thing. Again, what you're seeing how people are reacting. There's going to be 3 lines. One is kind of all respondents. The blue line is how Liberty responders are reacting, and the yellow line is how those non-Liberty spenders react to the content.
It's been a wild ride since I started Conservative Dad's Ultra Right Beer, and we're just getting started. We got back to the basics. Great beer, fun, patriotism, fast cars, and beautiful real women, and 100% woke free. But some people tell me I need to tone down the politics in our ads, so I'm making this ad just for them. How's that for tone? But wait, there's more. Assuming I don't wreck it, I'm giving away my gas-guzzling classic American muscle car at conservativedadscar.com.
All right, so now that you guys saw kind of the dials in action, let's kind of break it down and help understand and explain kind of what we're looking at and what we're seeing. So again, the blue line is the Liberty spender line. And what's positive here to notice is that it's always above the 0%, always above the baseline. That means it's going to have a positive score. And if you see it, it's scored plus 8.1 average net score with Liberty spenders. Among all respondents, it was a plus 1.0. But what we see here too is that non-Liberty spenders was at a negative 3.8. And you can see those based on the charts that the non-Liberty spenders pretty much remain below, and we can go back and look at these kind of points of where, there's kind of what I would call polarization, where non-Liberty spenders drastically differ with Liberty spenders, and this is kind of that danger that there is balance in how you can attract Liberty spenders and not kind of get detractors or push away potential customers that don't necessarily fall in that Liberty spenders. But then there's also the companies that may not care and really want to push a certain brand. And what we see here is, more so than the next video we see, there was that little kind of polarization between the non-Liberty spender and Liberty spender. Another thing to point out is, there are a couple of the real high points where we're talking about great beer, fun, patriotism, those types of, those types of conservative messaging, is really what they're going for. And if you look here, again, there's the Trump skid marks at the 50-second mark. You see there's kind of a double bump here, and that's almost, it shows a little lag. And so that spike is probably much larger than what you see on the chart, just because there is sometimes a lag between what people see, what people hear, and when they react. So, that in this ad really worked as well. Again, probably also turned away some of the non-Liberty voters. And then we'll look at another video here from Patriot Mobile, and we'll see how the lines kind of differ. And when it's done, again, we'll go over and kind of explain what's going on in the video.
I will say a couple of things on the ultra right beer. One of the things we talk about with brands that want to market to Liberty spenders is sometimes you do want to polarize.
Exactly.
And there's a spectrum we discuss in our book in the positioning step about, do you want to be a market fit or do you want to be a ideology approach? And ultra right beer is an ideology approach. It says it in their name, right? It's ultra right. There's no getting around it. If you hear Seth talk about it, Seth would argue that's the only way, right? That you're going to get the most success when you're bold in your vision and bold in your position. So I think he'd probably, if he was on here, he'd say, I did something right if I lost some non-Liberty spenders along the way, because that's not my target.
Right. They're not going to buy from me anyway.
That's absolutely the case. It could even be trying to make that as polarizing as possible. Getting those detractors. And then again, we can go back in and look at, who those non-Liberty spenders are and see, is this really coming from, people that identify as very liberal Democrats, or is it coming from people that consider themselves moderate? Right. And that might provide a little more color to the data as well.
Yeah. And just to take a moment, again, we were excited to partner with you on this because, again, we're showcasing the value, and we got permission to share these with all of you guys. But just helping you understand, as you're defining your messaging, if you're deciding to go this route and you're deciding, hey, I'm going to lean into this and I want to go after Liberty spenders, questions we get from clients are, well, one, how do I know what to say? What do they want to hear? How do I find them? And so we go into all of those things. And so again, being able to showcase when you're taking this strategy, hey, this is successful with the target, with the audience that I'm looking to have it be effective with, is really important. And so again, Seth knows who his audience is. He launched his company directly as a response to what Bud Light did. And so for him, this is spot on what's right for his brand.
Yeah.
Well, and one other point on that is, it's something that we found both in political video research and commercial video research. Authenticity is key. And if you're trying to be something you're not, and this is a perfect idea. I mean, Seth is being him. So it's hard to do wrong if you're at least being authentic. I think we've seen some big examples of that recently. But yeah, authenticity is paramount for a lot of these messaging campaigns. And I think he in that video, he came off as very authentic, which is something that is a huge plus for him. Yeah. And that was also something that we saw in the quantitative portion of the research.
I'm particularly excited to see our next one. Patriot Mobile, as many of you know, we discuss a lot in our book. It's a really amazing company. They offer wireless service in competition with Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, that whole crowd. And they're building a really amazing business. We had one of their board members on our show in one of our very first episodes. And they have well over 100,000. I want to say they're up to almost 150,000 members right now who pay for monthly for their wireless service. That makes them a company that's easily worth 9 figures, and explicitly targeting Christian and conservative consumers. And so in terms of a business that's, killing it in the parallel or Patriot economy, you got to look at Patriot Mobile. So I was real excited to show this one off. So let's show this one.
We are here to defend democracy.
Misinformation poses a threat to our nation's health.
Climate change is an emergency.
Democratic socialism.
Codify women's right to choose.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15.
Yeah. So when you look at language, you notice a big difference right off the bat. One is that, all 3 lines kind of mimic each other. What we're seeing is, even though not as many non-Liberty spenders move with liberty spenders. What you see is that trend line, especially in the middle, once it gets to the meat of the ad, it tracks pretty well. Obviously, liberty spenders scored it better. They had a average net of 9.4, but even liberty spenders were above the baseline at plus 0.6. And what you see is kind of that imagery at the beginning with non-liberty spenders really took it down underneath the baseline with the rioting and the protests and that stuff. And then what you'll see from the lines kind of between 10 and 15 with the liberty spenders, you're looking at like two split camps here. There were some respondents that reacted that they didn't like it because of it was I had some violent imagery, some protests, some off-putting stuff to your liberty spenders. But then there were some that reacted positively, and actually more reacted positively at almost net plus 20 in a time where you might not think so. But I think what's happening here is because it started with that quote from Reagan, some people were in on it and they knew that this was exposing and being used to attack kind of that left woke mob mentality movement. And so they were agreeing and liking what they saw on screen because they knew that it was exposing and being used to demonstrate the radical left. And so I think that's why you're seeing the positive reactions where you wouldn't typically, it'd be interesting to go back and see, this is something that we'd love to do, with a client when we have time and budget to do this stuff, just to be able to demonstrate what this graph would look like if they didn't put the quote up front. If people went into this not knowing that it was going to be a conservative leaning, kind of Reagan back type of product or advertisement. So those are the types of things when we talk about video based research, like those are the fun things that we can do with video to see like, all right, we did a really cool project, I'll talk about that later, testing same content, but just identifying the candidate that is a Republican or Democrat and how vastly different that those types of the reactions from voters, depending on who they thought the person talking was affiliated with. But again, back to this video, again, it's a little more balanced in terms of not off-putting to the non-liberty spenders while still performing really well with liberty spenders. And I think too, going back to your point of your type of company, your type of market, with Patriot Mobile, I think they still have some appetite for that moderate, middle of the road type of consumer that might not fall into the liberty spender category or may not know that they do. Because I think that the liberty spender is, as we identify, kind of identify themselves and outwardly say or project sort of consumer behaviors that demonstrate, trying to buy things with certain ideological or philosophical matches to their own value set. But there's a lot of people that may not fit nicely into that lean that way anyway.
That's
and may
exactly
be open
right.
to, and may be open to, in this case, a mobile carrier that isn't Verizon, isn't AT&T, hasn't been, gouging them or feeling like they've been gouged for a number of years, or have been acting in behaviors in the corporate world that may not align with, again, it's almost coming out now, it's just the common sense American. That you're seeing these companies waste money on things and do things that just defy common sense. And, you may not be a hard liberty spender, but you still may see a company like Patriot Mobile like, yeah, that makes sense, And if they, if it prompts them to check them out and see if the prices or match and if the service matches, who knows? You might be able to peel away some that you don't want. I think that's probably part of their marketing strategy too. So to be a little softer on the approach. But again, this demonstrates, I think, that you can have that conservative kind of liberty spender approach and still not be polarizing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and they were smart with, again, for our listeners, opening with the Reagan quote, which again, Reagan's still very popular amongst all, the vast majority of Americans. And so when you see that again, it also demonstrated something that we found in our research as well, going back to what kind of messages do liberty spenders want to hear. And this is one that, again, they're very good about using kind of, this had some imagery, like you said, but they tend to have a lot of, just Americana, just loving America, loving this country. And those are things that, again, are not divisive in any way. And so to your point, you're seeing that even with this ad, It caught some attention at the very beginning, and still was a net positive with all groups.
Yep.
I think that's absolutely true. You know, those Liberty Spenders love Marines. That's if I could take lessons from this ad, you know, there's a lot to be said to featuring veterans and helping people to understand maybe how you're supporting veterans or where you stand with veterans. They like Americana, and in the kind of the American ethic. You know, 'cause you see that kind of response to that kind of imagery. You know, when they brought up the Statue of Liberty as well, you saw. So, you know, if I'm doing some creative for a Liberty Spender audience, I'm going to put a lot of Americana in it. I think that's what these guys are looking for.
Well, I think the big thing too is, and something that I know you guys have found out as well, is the Liberty Spinner is not a monolithic group. There are a lot of subsets, subgroups of people in why they're, you know, seeking out. You have options in the parallel economy or in the Liberty Spinner economy, or, you know, a lot of it is as simple as, you know, we're just tired of, you know, having, you know, America be kind of looked down upon, or, you know, those types of just normal, again, it comes back to just common sense stuff. And so when you see ads that are able to do that and don't shy away from, you know, a sense of patriotism, a sense of, especially, you know, when you're talking, you know, made in America or manufactured in America type companies, but people are really interested in those. And the trick now is getting information out to those people that those products, those services exist. Because I think there's a huge swath, and again, not just Liberty Spenders. I think there's a huge swath of common sense Americans that are have an appetite for those types of products, that don't buy into all the hype, don't get into, you know, the stuff that they don't need to. I mean, if you make widgets, you make widgets. You know, let's just make widgets.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that they exist and how to buy from them. And again, so you're exactly right. So again, our theory of the case, you know, for so many different business owners is this is a great way to differentiate yourself. And this is a way to become and to get raving fan clients who know that you stand for something and they're aligned at a deeper level to who you are and what your company's about.
Yeah. So I imagine after doing 10 years of this and working for multiple, you know, campaigns, causes, organizations, you've had some interesting experiences, maybe some surprising findings, or maybe a client that, you know, because of what you did, they ended up sort of going back to the drawing board and finding a different way to approach it. So that what was kind of the most interesting case study or learnings you've had in your time doing this?
Oh boy, because there's a lot. I would say almost every project we ever work on, we don't get the results that we expect. And that's a good thing. I mean, that's why we do research. We, you know, if we got the results we expected every time, then I'd say don't hire us.
Right.
But that's the thing, you know. Sometimes when you'll see things that you don't think are going to work, and you see things that you think are way out there. One thing that I remember from the first Trump campaign was we tested an education ad, and it was one of those ads that, again, was done. It was about opportunity and school choice, and it was done really well. And everyone was really liked it until the Donald Trump, paid for by Donald Trump, came on. Then you saw this huge swath of people drop down, and especially in the moderate to liberal. But it's just so telling, because the message is good. They like the message, and it works. And I have to believe at the end of the day, even though they dialed in and were off put that it was a Trump ad, they maybe accidentally demonstrated that they're not that far off on the alignment on the policies as much as, and that was a very volatile time in the campaign. But it was just interesting to see that you could be fully support everything that's being said, but then when you see who's saying it, and that goes back to what I mentioned about the project we did with the red versus green. And so we cut the political video with conservative talking points, and it was made like a political ad with some, you know, random guy, I forget, Tom Worthington, I think we named him, was the candidate, and it was a standard 30-second spot. It was really right of center positions. What we did was we made two versions of video, one identifying him as a Democrat for Congress and one identifying him as a Republican for Congress, and then showed that to 500 people, each one to 500 people. And it was crazy. You had, if he was identified as a Democrat, Democrats loved the messaging, loved what was being said, would vote for him, would support him. And we're talking, ballot share dropped 40-50% among, liberals once he was identified as a Republican, which goes to show that at the time there's a brand issue here. It's not necessarily the messaging, but it was interesting just to see, because those are the things we can do now with video. When we have these questions like, I wonder how this message, if it was a Democrat saying it, would Democrats listen to it and agree with it versus if they think it's a Republican? And that's definitely what we demonstrated.
That's interesting. Certainly an illustration of what's happening in our politics right now. We've all kind of gone to our corners and supporting our people. It's probably a little disconcerting for some of my political ad makers if they think, well, man, it might be difficult to get some folks to switch sides on this campaign. But that's absolutely fascinating. And, it's probably hard to put a dollar figure on it, but in my mind, the way I look at it is there is, you might be paying, you might be paying $20,000 to do a survey to correctly spend $150,000. And in the value prop, the ROI on that is obvious, particularly when we know that our guts don't always work. It's one of the things we preach about in our book is too much of marketing is just the guru you hire who thinks this is absolutely the killer ad. They all have one or two in their portfolio that really worked. They don't show you the 70 that bombed, and you just trust their word for it. And maybe it has some buzzwords in there from your polling, but you really don't know, did this advance the cause or not? In fact, the funniest thing, the way I always tell it, a lot of these political campaigns, we do weekly phone calls, and we'll be on with the pollster and the TV guy and or gal, if you will, and every call goes the same. We're towards the end of the campaign. Pollster gets on and says, look, our tracking polls were up 5% amongst independent women. And then the TV firm says, well, man, that must mean our TV ad's working. We need to double and go from 1,000 gross rating points to 2,000 gross rating points. And then a week later, you get back on, and the pollster says, well, we're down 5 points with independent women since last week. And the TV person says, you know what? They must not have seen enough of our ads. Let's go from 1,000 gross rating points to 2,000. And it identifies the fundamental issue here, which is we don't really know if the ad worked. There's so many factors that are in the market. Was it the bad debate performance? Was it some mail piece that hit that we're not even talking about? Was it the fact that the candidate spoke in an open forum and that's been buzzing around behind the scenes in Facebook groups or others? Or is it just that the market's a little different? Maybe the national candidate with that party is really trending and dragging votes with it. And so the saying to ourselves, we're not gonna do any magical thinking here. We're gonna bring our dollars and we're gonna prove that what we're spending actually works. It often is a skipped step, but so important.
It is.
Well, I can talk that a little bit because we last election cycle on this, we were brought in heavily by the senatorial committee to test stuff for both Ron Johnson in Wisconsin against Mandela Barnes and then McCormick in Pennsylvania. We're talking ones that squeaked out less than 1% victories. And at the end of the day, you're right. You can't point to one thing in a campaign. They're so dynamic. There's so many things going on. But you need everything in politics you can do to get that 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4% edge. Because at the end of the day, that can and does win or lose election. And so the more you do to make sure that everything you're doing is data-driven, data-tested, and has more than just a few sets of eyes, that actually is rooted in sound decision-making based on on hard facts and figures, more likely you're going to be able to do that and to get that extra 1%, 2%. In the political realm, in the commercial space, it's just as important to maximize the effectiveness of any sort of messaging, because the other part of this too is you're going to spend money in it and to get in front of those eyeballs. And it's just like anything else. You want to maximize and optimize how many people are converted into customers, or at least are generating interest in your product. And so, if you're going to spend the money putting in front of those eyeballs, it makes a lot of sense to spend the money to make sure what you're putting in front of them will resonate and will lead to driving business your way.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And again, for people listening or tuning in or even watching, this is the case that we make with Liberty Spenders and conviction-driven marketing. And so maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, gosh, I don't know if I'm spending that kind of money on ads. Why would I consider doing this message testing? It can be valuable, again, even when you're trying to determine what is that positioning? What is the story that you're trying to tell? Is it the story of your founding? Is it the story of the problem you're trying to solve with your product or service? And so before you even get out, can be used in so many ways. You touched on that, AJ, as well, of just determining, okay, this is the statement we want to make. This is the brand that we're building, and feeling good that approach is going to be effective. And so there's so many use cases for it, which is why we're so thrilled to be talking about it, be promoting it, and encouraging people to consider this. Because again, it's not common. You talk to a vanilla marketing firm, and they're going to typically do testing live. So they're going to make some ads for you, and then they're going to just be testing how it goes. And if it goes well or doesn't, you don't necessarily know why. And so this arms you with so much data and confidence to know this is working. And again, you can see if there are parts that it's not, the message isn't, you can kind of figure that out and tweak it. So again, we just couldn't think more highly of this.
Well, and there's a secondary component to the testing too that I think has benefit, and it does. I'll explain it in the political sense. Is that we may test for ads, and one ad does really, really well overall, and the other three, so. But when we look at the different subsegments of like in the political campaign of gettables of a target audience that we really want to try to get in front of and pull some voters from, or make sure them up, bring them home, we might find in those 4 videos, one is the highest performing spot with that specific audience. So it's all of a sudden you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You may have your one ad that's really good that you're going to put a lot of money behind, maybe on TV or over the top or whatever you want to do with it. But there may be other videos that identify markets that they work in. And so using digital now and all these other tools you can put the highest performing spot in front of those particular eyeballs, especially if it's a high target audience. And so it gives you flexibility that if you spend money on creative, one might work best. You want to put the most money behind it, but there may still be secondary options to put other pieces of creative in front of audiences that it really works with.
So I think you're celebrating your 10-year anniversary this year for your business.
We've been in business for 10 years, started in 2015.
How many of these ads do you think you've tested? Are we talking thousands? What are we thinking by 10 years?
Thousands. Over 1,000.
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of these, we're a little more bespoke in the sense that, when we work with clients, in a campaign cycle, we'll probably do 100. And those are over the course of a couple of years.
Yeah. Just from a business owner's perspective, a lot of our audience, they own their own businesses. And I always like to ask what kind of lessons you've learned about running your own business in 10 years. What's something you did right? Maybe what's a decision that if you had it all over again, you would have?
Well, first and foremost, never give up.
Yeah.
I think out of the gate, and everyone's told it, and I don't know how many people actually believe it. Like, starting a business is tough, and it's going to take time, especially at the beginning. And I'd even say 10 years later, it's still, something that you have to get up and stay focused on, and know that not every everything's, after 10 years, you're still going to have to work for your market share. You're still going to have to be out pounding the pavement. You're still going to be out having to do shows like this to get your name out and to tell people about what you do, because the marketplace is crowded, and you just got to keep plugging away at it. And if you work hard and you keep focused on it, good things will happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're 18 years in, and it feels like every year is a don't give up year.
It does. It does. Even though every year gets better, it feels just as difficult as the first.
Yeah.
Well, that's who wants to stay stagnant? We want to grow. We want to expand. We want to improve.
And I think too that the testament of longevity is it gives us, people like you and me, time to get to know each other and to be introduced to each other and to have had some experiences, and now there's new opportunities that grow and build because of those professional relationships that aren't necessarily available to you in your first 2-3 years. Is this is 10 years down the road. You said I think we did our first project in 2018. I consider myself a Liberty spender. I mean, I was a Liberty spender before you named me a Liberty spender.
Right.
I didn't know what I was, but when I saw a commercial that, was just standing up for, you can tell when you see it.
Yeah.
And those are the types of products. There's certain products that, I'll pay more for. I'll pay the premium because I know it's a good company. I know that they've got good values. I know that they take care of their employees. I know that they, aren't involved either tangentially or directly in any of the nonsense. And that just makes me feel better spending my money. So, I mean, my wife and I have always kind of been Liberty spender, but we just didn't know what to call ourselves. So that was nice when I first heard the term and got so excited because I fall into that category.
Yeah.
And now we know how many of them there are, and they're just waiting to hear from companies that let them know, hey, I'm like you. And, your money's going to go towards people that aren't immediately turning it around and working against your interest. And you can really feel aligned. And so again, it's so exciting to be part of this movement and part of the shift in the marketplace.
At the end, we like to do a little rapid fire section. And I'd love to just have you say, what's a legacy you'd like to leave behind from G2 or just from your life?
Well, I mean, and this kind of goes back to my upbringing and watching my father all those years. He was a principled conservative Republican that taught me a lot about what conservatism really means, and patriotism and love of country, love of those, and you can make them traditional values, but those traditional values, those values that have held together the fabric of America for almost 250 years, and to be able to be a part of helping preserve that and moving the country in the right direction, whether it's from the political arena or in this case, kind of that liberty spender parallel conservative economy. I think it's way past time that these corporations have morphed into social agents that are driving really the social fabric in a way that I personally didn't grow up thinking was right. And as an adult now, continue to see it. And as a father, as a husband, you start to see those things in a different light. And, my legacy would be, I'd be happy if I was just able to help preserve some of that. And then, not as an old fuddy-duddy, but I truly believe that those are fundamental principles that keep together a society, keep together, whether it's from the community level all the way up. And so, to have an impact both in the political and in the commercial sector is something that it drives me every day.
What's something else you've been geeking out about? Maybe a passion project you're doing on the side that's not G2 related.
All right. Well, you're gonna regret this one. So a lot of the big things in my life come from men's league hockey. A few years ago, we were sitting at a bar after a beer league game, and we were talking about our, comparing stupid impulse eBay online buys. And a buddy of mine
as one does
about the time on 4th of July in 2001, his dad on an eBay auction he saw on the History Channel bought the world's largest American flag for like $15,000.
Mhm.
Oh my word.
Like, all right, well, your dad wins that award next, and so we kind of leave it there. But I'm just fascinated by it, right? And so I'm like, is this true? Did Josh's dad really buy the world's largest American flag? And it is. And he told me it's like 7 acres and weighs 2 tons. And so I get home and I just start researching it. And sure enough, his dad bought what was called the Great American Flag. And I don't want to bore you with this story, but it's a really good one. The Great American Flag was, I think, built in Evansville, Indiana, actually. I think in
Ooh.
19, well, there was a first one that was built for the bicentennial and was going to be floated on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, and they hung it from it, and the winds were such that it ripped it to shreds, and so a major disaster. And the guy that was the spearhead of this guy by the name of Len Silverfine wasn't deterred, went back to the drawing board, and came up with this concept of building the world's largest American flag. It would permanently hang on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge and be raised and lowered every patriotic holiday. So I'm just reading through this stuff, and Josh, this is incredible. You know what you have here. And he knew some of the story, but the story gets even crazier. So this Len guy, he goes back, he gets all these corporations and private donations up to build this flag. It's 7 tons and or 7 acres and like 2 tons. And the reason it's 2 tons is it's constructed with a fabric that's the same as like a lawnmower bag. So it's permeable, it dries fast, wind can go through. I mean, we're talking some of the largest textile manufacturers, the Textile Institute at Thomas Jefferson University. Like there was this major group of people that came together to build this massive flag that was going to fly on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Long story short, they didn't get the other group that was really supportive of this was the Ironworkers Union, because they were the ones that were going to put it up and then raise and lower it. But they ended up not getting, it was like $500,000 they needed for the rigging to put it up on the flag. Wow. So it kind of stalled out. Well, he didn't have that ready. So once the flag was done in Evansville, they displayed it for the first time at the Evansville airport, and he dedicated it to the Iran hostages who were still being held in captivity. And so I forget the date off the top of my head, but it was dedicated to the Iran hostages. Still doesn't have the money. Nothing comes through. He gets permission from the Reagan administration when the Iran hostages are coming home to unfurl the flag at Andrews Air Force Base. So the first thing that they see when they fly in is the American flag. So again, with the help of the ironworkers, they lay the flag out on the tarmac. When the plane comes in, I think it's up in Germany first, but when it comes into Andrews, it makes 2 passes so each side of the plane can see it and then lands. Fast forward a few years later, Len still hasn't been able to do anything with it. So he donates it to the federal government. And in a ceremony that you can find on YouTube, they unfurl it at the ellipse at the White House. And Reagan is there, Bush is there, officially, flanked by ironworkers. Reagan accepts the flag from Len from the Great American Flag Fund with the promise that he'll display it on the Washington Mall every Flag Day. Mm-hmm. Len turns it over. It probably ends up in a GAO or GSA warehouse, not to see the light a day again for 10 years. So this thing exists. It's there. 10 years later, they decide to give it to some cosmonaut or a astronaut or something museum in Kansas. Well, they think they're just getting a big flag. They don't realize they're getting a 2-ton flag, which that's the biggest problem, or the biggest obstacle here is weight.
I would say so.
There's actually flags that are bigger, but those are made out of very thin, very light, very durable, but very light material. And so they decide they can't do anything with it. They decide to team up with the History Channel and eBay and auction it off. In comes Josh's dad, sitting at home. 4th of July, Josh and his mom are out at some, 4th of July thing. Wife's gone, kids gone. He's sitting on the couch watching History Channel and makes the greatest impulse eBay buy of all time, buying the Great American Flag and the tractor trailer it comes with.
Wow.
So he doesn't know what he's going to do with it. I know you're probably sorry he asked the question. He doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know what he's going to do with it. but he bought it on July 4th, 2001. A few weeks later, September 11th happens. He lives outside of Pittsburgh, about 15 miles from Shanksville, where Flight 93 went down. So he immediately sets to getting it displayed at a racetrack there as a memorial for the Flight 93 victims. It's there for a few days. It gets put away, and nothing happens to it until about 3 years ago when Josh and I started the Great American Flag Foundation. It's a nonprofit to restore and preserve and hopefully ultimately get it put on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge where it was originally intended to go.
Wow.
Wow.
AJ,
So that's my other
cool.
pet project.
That's fascinating. Where is the Verrazano bridge?
It's actually it's in New York City. It's the one that connects Staten Island to New York. And it's the only one that had the structural integrity and span that was necessary to do it. It actually was designed to be raised and lowered. It has holes in the middle where the cables go through it. So the cables can add extra strength from crosswinds. But that's where it was always intended to go. Ideally, we'd like to find it a permanent home. There needs to be. We actually unfurled it a few years ago for the first time since 2001 to take a look at it to see what the condition was, to see if there had been any deterioration. We had some textile experts, some experts in dyeing, to come look at it and to assess. Is it still? And I got to tell you, this thing was built well. Structurally, everything is completely sound. There's some fading that would. And some spots that would need to be spot cleaned. Again, spot cleaning a 2-acre flag is a chore in and of itself, which we're in the process.
Can you even
of
call it? I mean, I
flag.
guess it's still spot cleaning, but the whole visual of that is completely different based on what you're talking about here.
Yeah, even unfurling it.
I mean, it takes cranes, and every time it's been unfurled with manpower. Usually, volunteers. A lot of times it was the people from the Ironworkers Union. But a lot of times, one time it was displayed on the mall. It was literally people standing in line at the Washington Monument, saw what was happening and came over, pitched in, helped, and unfurled it.
I love that.
And so, it's just it's not the world's largest American flag anymore. But I gotta say, it's it's the largest most American flag. It's got a tremendous backstory. And it's a huge undertaking, and it's one that we've been at this for like 3 or 4 years now, just trying to figure out logistically. I think one of the problems too is just we need to find that permanent home for it to make it worthwhile. There's a thought of it being like a traveling thing, but again, it's 7 tons or 2 tons. It's difficult. But anyway,
that was definitely an unexpected answer to the question. And I love it. We love what we find out by asking these things. And we'll make sure we put a link in the show notes for anyone that wants to learn more about that in your work and your foundation. So thank you for sharing that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And well, maybe I'll come back as the co-founder of the Great American Flag Foundation someday, and we can talk a little more in depth about it, because it's a great story. It's a great American story. And it's actually the reason Glenn wanted to do it back then was it was coming out of the Vietnam War. It was coming out of Watergate. He felt there was a real lack of sense of pride in the country at the time. And he really wanted to build the world's largest American flag to try to bring back that sense of patriotism. And I mean, there's a lot of direct parallels to today that I think, it's interesting that he designed this shortly after the centennial or bicentennial. And we're coming up on the 250-year anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So you've got, just a tremendous, just a tremendous piece of American history that I'm involved with, and hoping to get some momentum behind it and get it cleaned up and get it repaired and get it put somewhere.
Well, we should talk Donald Trump into planting that flag in Greenland, where don't
even stop.
Yeah, he's serious. He wants to buy Greenland, and that'd be a perfect place to put it.
Well, I've been toiling with approaching his administration, because that Verrazano Narrows Bridge is the one that ultimately connects Queens to New York City. And one thing we learned from people The one thing people really liked about Trump, one story people liked about Trump early on was the one about getting the ice skating rink finished in Central Park. That was something that really resonated with voters that didn't know much about Trump at the time outside of his persona, but that he's a person that can and has had a big track record of getting things done. So it has crossed my mind about approaching and seeing if there's any support we could get there, because again, we're 50 years later, and this it needs a place, and now could be the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's been awesome having you on. And it's just, there's a lot to learn from G2 and what you guys do and the importance of testing your ads. So I really appreciate you joining. For anyone who wants to learn more about AJ or G2, you can go to www.g2analytics.co and learn more about G2, or you can certainly reach out to us because we'd be very happy to make a connection. We will have a link to the YouTube video, this episode show notes. So for those of you who want to see the visuals, make sure you come and check those out.
And again, if we have added value to you, we hope you'll like and subscribe so you don't miss anything in the future. We thank you for tuning in. We again invite you to join the Liberty Partnership community at libertyspenders.com. And again, you can learn more there and download a free copy of our book at libertyspenders.com/free. Thanks so much for joining. Until next time.